A warm welcome to everyone who's taken the time off their day to listen into this webinar. I wanted to address the elephant in the room before we get started. Lina, who was supposed to be a part of this webinar, unfortunately couldn't attend because she woke up today feeling a bit ill. So instead, I will be stepping in. My name is Frederick. I'm responsible for partnerships at Team Taylor and been a bit of a talent acquisition and HR expert in doing a lot of these speeches in the past. We're really looking forward for this hour together with you guys. We'll have pretty much 45 minutes of live webinar, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A. But of course, during the duration of the webinar, you will always be able to ask questions. So there's both a chat in the bottom and as well as a Q&A feature that you can ask questions about, and we'll be able to answer the questions if anything comes wrong. If you want us to continue on the subject a bit more that you find interesting, or have a follow-up question or anything like that. It's also worth mentioning that this webinar will be recorded, so you can rewatch it as many times as you'd like, or if somebody misses it that you really want to share them with, you can share that with them afterwards. And that will be sent out either later today or tomorrow on Monday morning. So you'll have something to look forward to after the weekend. But I'm also joined by two incredible people on this webinar, and we'll start off with Astrid, who has an incredible presentation for us today, but she's also a digital strategy expert who can really talk about the change going on in the work environment. But I will let you introduce yourself, Astrid, instead of me trying to butcher what you do and take away your excellence.
Thank you so much, Frederick, for the introduction, and I look forward also to discussing with you in a bit. So yeah, my name is Astrid. I'm based in Copenhagen. I have my own agency where I do social media and digital strategy for companies and municipalities and so on. I have a political background, and then for the last 8 years, I've had my own company. I also do board work, so I'm the co-chair of UNICEF Denmark and in various other companies, Danish and international companies, and some startups, especially working with circular business models and also, of course, working with digitalization in many ways. I also write books about the digital field, and my latest one is called Unmute dit digitale lederskab, Unmute Your Digital Leadership. It's in Danish and might come out next year in English. I've been told. We're working on that. Some of the things I'm going to be addressing today is also explained much further in the Unmute book. One of the things that I'm mostly excited about that I'm doing right now is actually a new podcast that I just launched 3 weeks ago. It's called Tech Me Higher, like Tech Me Higher, Tech Me Higher. It's also in Danish. I'm sorry for the ones of you who don't speak Danish, but if you do, please listen to it and subscribe. And it's about the big tech companies. How can we regulate them? How do they manipulate us? What do we benefit from it? And politics and so on. So all the things that I like to work with. And what I'm going to be talking about today is what is the future of work going to look like? How do we embrace all the changes that are going on in the work field? And I guess the most of you have experienced quite some changes in the last 1.5 years, 2 years almost with the coronavirus. And I think also that HR in particular is going to play a huge role in the future of the workplace, especially if you step up in HR and actually take that role. So I find that a lot of managers are looking forward to when things are going to be normal again, like before Corona. And I actually think it's going to be the job of HR to tell those managers it's not going back to normal. We better embrace remote work. We better embrace the hybrid workplace, because that's going to benefit us so much in the short run, but also long term. So if you want to become an attractive and thriving workplace, you really need to embrace remote work, and you need to embrace the hybrid workplace. And a lot of people these days are telling me, okay, the remote work, we kind of got into control. We learned that during Corona, like right now, we're doing a webinar, we could do online meetings. But the hybrid format where some people are in the office and some people are working at home, that's very complicated. And I think the best place to start working with that is actually to acknowledge, yes, it is complicated. We don't have any experience whatsoever with doing it. Maybe we do have a bit from the coronavirus, but before that, we have hundreds of years working and getting used to like physical meetings. So the whole idea of like working hybrid is new to all of us, whether you're like the intern or you're like the CEO of the company. You need to learn and adapt to this way of working. So I think acknowledging it and then looking for new methods, being curious and playful about, okay, so how do we make this work? The one thing you shouldn't do is to force people to come back to the office. So I hear about a lot of companies who are trying in many different ways to kind of like tempt people and tempt the employees to go into the office. I think you should go another way around and think about the employee experience. So how do you make sure that you have a great employee experience, whether people are working from home or in the office? So don't kind of like cheat people for being working remote and make sure, okay, if they come into the office, they have like really great lunch and all these kind of things. Maybe make sure that the people working from home, working remote, they also get some of those benefits one way or the other. So how do you create employee experience digitally and in the hybrid workforce? And I think that requires the right mindset and culture, but it also requires some technical tools, kind of like a toolbox that many workplaces actually didn't have before Corona, and a lot of workplaces are still lagging behind in terms of having sufficient technical tools. So if you want to, I mean, at most workplaces, you have like meetings and you have emails, and that's like the primary framework of the organization and the way you communicate. But there's so many more tools you can work with. So some companies, they have dived into different kind of chat tools like Slack, Yammer, and WhatsApp. And if you look at the younger generation, you can see that most of their communication is actually chat-based. So they're used to like Snapchat, Messenger, WhatsApp, and so on. So think about how can you actually integrate that into your company. So just doing emails and just doing online meetings might not be the best way to create this kind of digital employee experience. So think about maybe the weekly meeting you have with the team leader, and the team leader is is explaining a lot of things about what is going on, what is going to happen, and so on. Maybe you could record that as a podcast and send it out to the employees every once a week and so on, and they can listen to it while they are on the way to work, or maybe they can go for a walk during the office hours and listen to it instead. So making the communication seamless and making about giving the employers a good experience instead of about making it cramming them into meetings and kind of like trying to force them into the office. I think that requires, that's the mindset that is required if you want to have an interesting workplace in this day and age. And also think that the whole idea of like IT belonging in the IT department, we need to change that. Everybody in the company has some kind of IT responsibility. So you have, if you want to, maybe you want to have some workshops that should be more creative. I've heard a lot of people during Corona talking about, oh, if you want to be creative, we really need to be physical. And my answer is usually saying, if you are creative, a creative person, you're creative whether you are physical or digital. I mean, as a person, you will always be physical somewhere. And I might be as creative in front of my computer as in a room with a lot of Post-its. I just think we tend to think that, okay, if we're together and we have a lot of like Post-its, then we are creative. But if you have the right online tools, you can actually also be creative and have, you know, online dashboards and tools you're working with and making different kind of collaborations. And when we speak about digital collaboration, I think it's very important to be synchronous. It's very difficult to say in English. So not to be synchronous, but be like, you don't have to be in the same time and at the same place to work together. So if you work across time zones, if you work across geographical locations, you'll need to do it more written and maybe more documented in voice memos and written memos, instead of saying, okay, we can't work together unless we have a physical or digital meeting. So being not synchronous is very important, I think. And so one of the things I think is very important is that you kind of like embrace being like a newbie, being a beginner, embrace learning. There's a whole movement about no-code tools, and if you Google it, you'll find that even though you're not like a very tech-savvy person, you can actually create your own dashboard or maybe make a chatbot for your co-workers. You can learn that within like 30 minutes. So I think it's very important that within the HR department that you actually embrace this kind of like no-code tools, no-code movement, because it will give you a lot of advantages. It will give you a lot of possibilities and options in terms of like developing the whole organization. It would also mean that if you have an idea saying, oh, it could be cool to make this kind of like new app, or it could be cool to have this chatbot or this dashboard, you don't have to wait till the IT department has the time to help you. You can actually go develop it yourself. You might just make a mock-up, and then you might need some external help and so on, but it'll bring you a bit further than just saying, there's a problem, we don't know how to fix it. So having this learning and playful culture, and also sometimes saying we don't have the answer. We actually don't know what is the right thing to do in this situation. Let's test it out. So for example, if you're looking for a new tool to be more creative when you work hybrids and bringing people who are there at the office physical and people who are working from home together, you might find 5 different online tools. Then you might divide yourself into 5 groups, maybe just 5 people, and each of you try one of these tools. And you spend a week, 2 weeks maybe doing that, and then each of you assess that tool and say, okay, I like this, I don't like that. And then from that, you actually make a decision. So instead of saying, we need to, the CEO needs to make a decision and so on, play with it, try it out. And a lot of these tools are either free or very cheap actually to get started with. So I think that will be one of the responsibilities and roles in the HR department, to also be able to work with and actually recommend what would be the right tools for us to work with. So just to sum up, and then we'll hand it over to the rest of the panel and the discussion with you guys as well. Don't look back. We're not going back to before Corona. Many people want to work in new ways with more flexibility and remote work. And it will benefit the organization and your recruitment. And also, as many of you have seen already, if you allow people to work more remote, you can actually recruit from a much larger geographical area. And you will also be able to attract people who require, or at least really appreciate, the flexibility. And you'll find a lot of creative people, a lot of IT skilled people, they really embrace having that kind of flexibility, and nobody looking into when they are working or when they're not working. And if it's a good day on the water, they might want to go surfing or whatever, but they will do their job. So also, and that brings me to another point, measure what's important. So measure results, work satisfaction, sense of direction, sense of belonging, not the hours spent in the office or the number of meetings that people are able to attend. I also think it's very important that we need to accept, and I think that the whole Corona, the whole Corona situation has learned us and reminded us that people are very different in the ways they're working and in the ways they prefer to work. I think a lot of people have realized that having some less noise in the work environment is very helpful for them and has actually made them even more productive. So to the HR people, I would like to say, try to avoid making too many rules that apply to everyone, and make the teams or maybe even the employees decide for themselves. So I've seen a lot of companies saying, oh, we need to have rules about how many days people should work and how and so on. What would happen if you don't make those rules? I think that would be an interesting experiment, and make people decide for themselves, or help them decide how they actually work best. So I think with the right technology and platforms, you can enhance your efficiency, your communication, your social encounters, and the creativity at the workplace while working remote or hybrid. So that was my very long introduction here.
No, I think it's really fascinating. I think there's so many things that has changed in the last years, and I think we're actually seeing a revolution in the workforce, and we're seeing a behavioral change in employees. We're seeing a behavioral change in companies. We're seeing everything change in a drastic way, which forces people to have more ownership and also be able to share more ownership and be more creative and try new things and really do a lot of different things in order to get the same kind of success and even succeed to a different extent. It unlocks so many new opportunities, and it also has so many new challenges, which is why it could be quite fun in this kind of scenario as well, to be a part of this revolution and really make these changes. And Eric, I realized that you didn't get the full introduction that you deserve, but you have a lot of insights about this topic as well. Could you just say a few words about yourself, and also like what were your input in terms of what is happening right now and what has been happening over the last 18 months?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Fredrik, and no worries. My name is Erik Stenner. I work at Catalyst One, and I would sort of profile myself as a very HR nerdy guy who really is in the middle of helping HR departments to create these kind of solutions, to be more agile and be more hybrid, but also to have, master data, of course, on demand, available for everyone at this very point. One thing that strikes me, Astrid, whenever you talk about this as the expert that you are, is a quote from, I think it's Winston Churchill who said it, and he said, "Don't waste a good crisis." And for me, that's really what the key is here. That we've been living in this pandemic world now for some time, and that things have caused us to change, and they should embrace the positive things when it comes to that change, and learn to use what you've learned during this year. There are solutions out there that can really help you save a lot of time, and make people be more flexible and agile. And I don't think there are things that can help companies in many ways, but I think there's also things that every company can do. You don't need to do everything. It's about embracing what's right for you. I think that's really the key of it.
Yeah, now I think it's really fascinating. If we look back into just the last centuries, most of the most innovative solutions that we are using today, and the most of the innovative, disruptive things that have happened in the workplace and in our personal lives, has been directly followed to a recession or a crisis of some sort. Like some of the most innovative, successful companies today were founded during the Great Recession, like in 2008. And some of the most industrial things that are just useful for us, like the GPS, that originates from the world wars and the wars that come in those crises. So of course, this is not the same level, but we can really take that opportunity to start innovate and actually use this opportunity to have take one step back in order to take 4 steps forward and really take that opportunity. But we're also seeing right now that we're 18 months in, plus minus a few months. Some people have had hard restrictions, some people have had harder rules, but the honeymoon phase is starting to a lot of people are starting to exit the honeymoon phase. In the beginning was all fine and dandy, people get to work from home, and now people are starting to come back to the office. They're starting to find challenges with some people being in the office, some people being remote, some people thriving at home, some people not thriving at home. In the beginning, that was the only rule, that you were at home and you just had to make the best of it. And now we're in this hybrid workplace. So I think it's really fascinating to see your approaches of how do you balance that, and what are the expectations as an organization, and what different employees you will have, because you will have some who just want to work from home, some who want to work from home 3 days a week, and some 2 days a week, and some want to be at the office every single day. And how do you balance that? I think that's going to be a challenge for the next coming years, because I think, as Astrid said, there's no going back. This is what it's like, and if you tell everybody that you either have to come to the work or if you have to stay at home, I think you're going to lose a lot of great talent. So you have to find that balance as well. So do you have any ideas of how companies can actually use this opportunity, Astrid?
Yeah, no, I have a lot of other things I would like to say, but I think it's good to have you in the discussion as well, Eric. So what I'm thinking is that it's about being curious, and I know that's not rocket science, but instead of always trying to look for safe ground and say, okay, now we are in a place where we know what's going to happen, and it's much easier if everybody's just coming into the office at least 3 days a week. Instead, try to be curious about what happens if, and try to keep challenging your assumptions, because I go in and out of a lot of different companies every week. And I find that in every company, they always thinks that for them, it's very particular and very special. And I must just say it's not. There's so much similar in a lot of companies. But they also always have these kinds of assumptions that are going on. Like, for example, that if people don't come into the office, they're not part of the culture. They don't have this sense of belonging, and that might be true. But it's also, instead of then thinking, okay, the solution is that we bring people to the office, the solution might be, how do we create a digital culture? So how are we good digital hosts? How do we take care of each other digitally? How does the culture of the company actually translate into the digital format? And I've been working with social media for the last like 15 years, and you see that people find each other, people have communities. There's a lot of bad things going on social media as well, but you actually find a lot of people that have this kind of sense of belonging to various groups of in social media. And what you will find in a company and you also see that now, that people are already working, across countries and working globally. So of course it can work. And a lot of companies also realize, okay, we don't need to meet our clients physically. We can actually meet our clients and we can onboard if we just do it digitally. And I think also you can learn to trust people. So I have never met you physically, but we had some chit chat before we started today. And for me, that is just as good as if we had been in the same room. So I think we need to break down some of these barriers, thinking that, it has to be physical in order to be good and to have some kind of quality.
I think that last point is really, really interesting, because that's one of the selling points, especially when you hear people like they want to have physical meetings, because you have the coffee machine talk before the meeting, you talk when you're setting things up, and how was the commute and how was the weather and that kind of stuff. You really need to enable people to be like personal. But Eric, I know that you also have a lot of input in the topic, and like what's happening now with the different expectations and that kind of stuff. We also have a question from someone listening in that we will answer in a second.
Cool. I like that we have questions. No, but I think there could be expectations, on different levels. I mean, today we pay our bills, with bank ID, and we do everything through the phone. So why shouldn't you be able to, for example, sign an employment contract through e-sign on your phone? These are things that a couple of years back were seen as futuristic and for early adopters only. But today, that is really where things lies, right? That's normal today. It's not longer not normal to be onboarded digitally, or have your performance process done digitally, or have a one-on-one with your manager like we're sitting right now. These are things that are happening right now and at this very moment, and I think you need to embrace that. We're not going back. It's not like things are going to be less flexible or less agile. So you need to offer that sort of flexibility as an employer, I think, because if you do that, then you're being digitally mature, and I think you can attract the right people then.
No, but I think as an HR department right now, it's probably one of the most challenging times that's ever been for a lot of people, because right now you have to cater to so many different generations and so many different expectations and so many different people who have different expectations, different like needs, and just like looking at the different generations that are entering the workforce, like it's drastically different to how you need to treat what a Gen Z and millennial and the older generations, what they are looking for in a workplace, how you treat them. And you need to be so agile and need to be so personalized, but you still need to have that solid foundation. And I think one of the questions that came in from someone listening in is, we will see more activity in the pre-boarding phase of the world, and how will that transition as the world and the digital world matures. And I think, at least from my point of view, I think you really need to be like more focused on that kind of like digital onboarding phase, and you need to work like that so you can give everybody the same kind of opportunities. Because it's pretty much what Astrid said, that if you have people at the office and you have people at home, like they can't be separate. They need to be given the same opportunities. They need to feel like the same part of the culture, and they need to be given everything in the same way. So I think we definitely need to see that we have an underlying structure that we can always rely on, always come back to, and digital onboarding and pre-boarding and like signing contracts. That should like be the foundation that allows you to be more personal and be more, and make sure that you're out there with your team and be more creative, and allow you to like really show that you have your presence with the employees. But Astrid, you probably have some input here as well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that So if you want to hire people in the company, they will also work remote. They might need to work with their co-workers being at home, or maybe their customers being in various locations. So the whole idea of like boarding them and testing them online makes really good sense, because how are they in an online meeting? How are they actually doing on camera? How are they actually doing that? So you should basically test them for the things that they're going to be needing in the job. You might also test them, how good are they at chatting, or how good are they at, you know, being informal in a Slack or a Yammer community, because that's the kind of thing that you will need from a future employer. So I think the whole idea of like digital onboarding will also be a better match for the actual job they're gonna have. And another thing I think is very striking to me is that the whole like job posting area is so old-fashioned. So like, at least in Denmark, but I kind of assume that it's the same in other countries, because we are actually very digital advanced in Denmark, and I know in Sweden, of course, as well, and other Nordic countries. But the job postings, it's basically like a paper now in a PDF, and now in HTML on the internet, but it hasn't changed much. So if you could like kind of like deconstruct that whole thing and say, okay, we're looking for millennials, or even Gen Z, and soon it's going to be Gen Alpha, who are like, you know, they're used to looking at YouTube since the age of 2. They're on TikTok, they're on Snapchat, they're on Instagram, and then you want to hire them with a piece of paper. I mean, we need to kind of like deconstruct the whole onboarding what do you call it, ecosystem in a way from the very beginning. And I think also this crisis is a good time to actually build it up in another way. Spend some more time on TikTok and YouTube. I'm not kidding, because the whole like language there, the visual identity of it, and the whole way of like approaching people is very different. I don't believe that if you're like a top medical company, you should go out and do exactly what they're doing on TikTok. But you will have future employees who are kind of like, that's the media environment they are growing up in, and they have probably never written or looked in a physical newspaper or watched Flow TV and so on. So in that sense, there's also like a huge learning possibility option for HR departments to think in new ways.
Absolutely. I remember seeing when the pandemic started that the biggest driving force for digitalization of the company isn't the CTO, isn't the chief digital officer or the CEO, it's the pandemic. And we see that like right now is a perfect time for you to start leveraging technology in order for you to actually be successful and supporting this remote world and these remote colleagues. And there's so many things that you can do if you leverage technology correctly. When it comes to communication, there's Slack, and there's stuff like Mentimeter or like Microsoft Teams or Miro, whatever that could be. When it comes to recruitment and HR and this entire processes, the digitalization that is available right there is there to support you, so you can spend more time on developing the processes, being there more present with your team, and just working on that so you can build a better workplace for everyone included. And I think, like Eric, you work with this a lot and try to help your clients with these projects. You probably have a lot of input. So, like, what do you see out there with your clients, and what's the
I really like the question. It's and I like it because I've seen a change in the trend. Usually what we call preboarding, what's going to happen with the employee before they get onboarded, used to be very, very, very hard aspects, such as reporting this information about yourself, or order a computer, make sure there are a desk for the new employee with flowers on whenever they begin. But we can certainly see that another layer in terms of communications has been added there, which is obviously the employee perspective. Maybe a move, from the CEO of the company is being shared with the user, or maybe their entire social media platforms are being shared. Please come into Instagram, and look at who we are. And that invitation part of the pre-boarding wasn't really there before, even though I think that it actually occurred, because as a new beginner at a company, you probably investigate your new employer from top to bottom, looking at everything that's out there about them. And by opening up and being transparent and inviting to your digital presence already in the pre-boarding, I think you're showing off as transparency and you're very true employer brand as a company. So I like that. I see that trend has been, changing to that aspect.
Yeah, and just the overarching stuff when it comes to digitalization, we can see that companies are starting to embrace more technologies in order to enable them to be more successful in a lot of different ways. We're seeing that companies are using video interviews in the recruitment process. They're starting to be more creative how they attract people. They're starting to use better technologies to do that kind of stuff. They're starting to use the e-signature stuff that you mentioned, Eric, that all of a sudden you can sign the contract and have to come into the office. We have tools that allow you to get access to all the information. Doesn't matter if you're at the office or if you're working from home. It allows you to have the culture and that kind of stuff, which is really exciting. But Astrid, do you have something?
Yeah, no, I just want to add a few things, because I think if you're in the HR department, you can look at all the things that you find that you're repeating over and over again. So every time, you have coming employees calling you or writing you, it might be the same questions they're always asking. Or when you're onboarding, it will probably like 80-90% will be you repeating yourself. And every time you're doing something repetitive, that's where you can actually add something with digitalization, whether it's some kind of like fancy tool and system, or it's just videos or podcasts or other kind of like content that you can create and then provide the future employee with. And I think just going a few years into the future, I think we will also create these kind of like virtual reality environments. We heard Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook talk a lot about this metaverse, and it might be very abstract still for many of us. We see it a lot in gaming, but I also think we'll see it in onboarding. We already see it a lot in like terms of training. Amazon and other companies, they usually use it for like training of employees. And you can also imagine using it for onboarding and preboarding, where you can have this kind of like VR environment where people can actually see the company. They can maybe follow a VR meeting and, kind of like be an intern in a virtual representation of the company. So we're not there tomorrow, but I think in a few years' time, we'll definitely see that also being a part of what the HR department might be able to offer.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And then just following on that topic, like what kind of stuff have you seen in terms of technology that people are starting to use to like start like bridging the gap between physical and remote and getting that hybrid workplace? And what kind of tools and what kind of incentives have you seen workplaces initiate that are really successful and just like fundamentals? It would be really interesting to see like what you have seen that has been successful and what trends people are starting to jump onto and what kind of tools people are starting to leverage in order to have that hybrid approach.
So I think, I don't know, Eric, do you want to?
Yeah, sure, I can go ahead. I mean, obviously, I'm a bit biased in this area as working at Catalyst One, but I think there are hard aspects of things and then there are soft aspects of things. There are things which just need to work. And obviously, we can certainly see that companies that didn't have HR master data before the pandemic certainly want to have it right now because they cannot live with it. It's such of an on-demand need, that just needs to be there. It's unbearable to live without digital support for HR master data, performance management, doing salary reviews digitally. It's very hard for companies to still live in master Excel files. So please don't. But that's just the first hard aspects of things. And during the year that we've been in, I can certainly see that the even more softer or more easy to use modules such as feedback module, which we, for example, have, or a work balance module, which keeps track of, whether an employee has enough to do or if they're enough motivated, etc. Those are also things which have really made a good change out there for companies. And what I think is that depending on where you are in your digital maturity, then different things will be important to you. But I can certainly see that these softer things, having one-to-one, having feedback platforms, etc., these are things which will soon to be almost equal as important as the hard things such as HR master data or salary reviews, performance management, because we need that softer approach to these teams as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that sums it up.
Absolutely, but that's it. Sorry.
No, I just think I think definitely there's something on the technical side which is not like super technical. So it's not like a big huge system, but it's more in terms of like embracing, like could be like an EPS, employee promoter score, where you kind of like start tracking both the performance but also the mood. How is the organization doing today? Are people satisfied, and so on? I think we'll have more and more data in that field and getting used to that. So I think a few years ago, we talked a lot about tracking the employees, but I think actually it should be the other way around. How can the employees kind of like track the company? And of course, they also have a share of the responsibility. So if they're always dissatisfied, I mean, maybe there's something to talk about there. But then as a manager, you might be able to spend your time where it's most needed, instead of just like having a lot of meetings where everybody should attend all the time. And one of the people we talked to for this book is called Jim Hammond-Snape. He's like top head of board at Maersk and Siemens, and also very involved in the World Economic Forum. And he kind of decided, when we all had to go in these digital meetings, that for every digital meeting he had, he would be like, this has to be the best digital meeting ever. And I think it's good also to have this approach to how do we create the best hybrid meeting ever. So how do we make sure that the people who are physical feel included? How do we make sure that the people are online feel included? And actually, I was just thinking about last night, what is actually the good hybrid meeting? Because what I see happen, unfortunately, a lot of places, that the people who are physical, they are like the A audience, and then the digital people are like the B audience, right? And you want to make sure that everybody has a role. So maybe the people who are not in the physical space, who are joining online, they have kind of like a different role, because they're not in the room, so they might be a bit more able to do like seeing it a bit from the outside. They're not a part of this like group dynamic that might be at the physical meeting. So you might want to actually use the digital participants as some kind of like pit stop, saying, okay, we're just going to stop here and make sure that the people joining us digitally, they also included in this. So how did you listen in on this discussion? What are your perspectives? So you might actually want to assign the digital people with some kind of roles, maybe listening in, or being more like critical, or whatever kind of things. Kind of like, kind of like a role game, but thinking about what kind of roles do we have in this meeting, and how do we make sure that everybody feels included and that everybody is able to benefit. A very simple thing that I often do when I have this kind of hybrid format is to make like Slido. You can also use Mentimeter and other things, kind of like for voting, and making like word clouds, and kind of like these kind of things, because then the audience, the physical audience and the digital audience, are able to join in the same Slido. So they're able to put words in the same word clouds, or participate in the same polls. And that actually gives you this kind of sense of a community or belonging, that we're talking in the same frame here. So that's a very simple tool that I use. There might be others, but kind of like having the ambition of making this the best hybrid meeting ever. I think that's a good starting point, even though it's very banal.
I think that kind of approach should have to a lot of things. You could always go in with
Exactly.
like, this should be the best meeting, the best lunch, the best coffee, the best
whatever. Day ever, right? Yeah.
If you were that optimized, like optimistic, the world would be a better place. But I think it's really fascinating that the aspect of like the presence disparity. Like when you have a lot of people in the room and a few people are like, oh, digitally. I think everybody listening in has probably been one of those scenarios where you're working from home and the entire team is in the office, and vice versa. And like you feel like you don't get a word, like you can't say a word, and people are talking, you don't hear what they say, and then people are laughing and people are missing and that kind of stuff. So it really forces you to invest in technology to allow you to have that kind of presence, allow you to work with a tool and engage everybody in the room, not just the people sitting in the room, because it's so easy to forget. Just want to follow up there, David. Do you have any tips on like how do you make people feel more included, and how do you make sure that you engage these people in this hybrid workplace and that in the overall structure? Or Eric, sorry. I read
no worries.
So,
I think I really like this topic. I mean, these are things that we've seen in like e-learnings or digital courses for years. So why is it new to meetings? I mean, this is a good question to ask yourself. But I think it's about about using the tools that are right for you. At Catalyst One, we work a lot hybridly, and we use everything from Mentimeter to actually a nice cool tool is called Miro, which is sort of a workshop. You mentioned post-its earlier, Astrid. It's like working with a post-it board, but you're doing it digitally. And that can, make people feel very included in the meeting. And I think you need to assess and use the tools that you need for the right meetings. I mean, obviously, not all tools will be needed in every meeting, but I'm sure that there are some which can help. So embrace it. That's, I guess, is my key point of it.
But if we look at just the overall workplace, not just the specific meeting, how do you make people feel more engaged in that specific meeting? Like, what can you do to engage the entire workplace? Like, historically, it was easy when you met people in the like the lunchroom, when you met people at the coffee machine, like you had that conversation. You had an after work or you had a lunch or whatever that was easy because it was natural interaction, which means now you have to plan those interactions to some extent.
Yes.
We started doing like lunches or like dance parties and like book reading shows and book clubs just to allow people to be engaged and that kind of stuff. It would be interesting to see both everybody listening in, what kind of incentives have you started during the pandemic to include everybody as well, and also hear like with your tips to like what kind of stuff can you do in order to engage the entire company, not just the people sitting at one office.
So I think for me, I mean, it's very much about also embracing social media. So you have this kind of internal social media, which could be Facebook Workplace, Slack, Yammer, and so on. And I think that's very good, where you have like kind of like the more formal channels and then the more informal. You'll find that people organize themselves within their teams, but also you'll find that everybody maybe with an interest about sci-fi literature or something else, they can find each other. And also know from like big international corporations that everybody may be working with IT or everybody working with HR. They are able to communicate much less, much less seamless, much more seamless in this kind of like a Slack informal community. So that's the one thing. But the other thing, of course, is embracing like external social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so on, especially LinkedIn if it's in the workforce, because I find in a lot of companies that the more the managers and the employees that actually communicate on LinkedIn, the more everybody in the company knows about what's going on. So a lot of CEOs I talk to, they say, okay, I use LinkedIn mostly actually or indirectly to reach my employees. So we can put a lot of things up on the intranet and our homepage and so on. But if I put it on LinkedIn, I know that everybody reads it in the company. So I actually think that you can have people like talking more about what they do and sharing like good work stories and sharing also, the good energy and culture of the company online. It will benefit the company. It will benefit the recruitment. It will benefit the brand and the sales. So basically in my company, I'm only myself, but I don't do any like formal sales, but I do a lot of communication on LinkedIn and with my books and my podcast and so on. And that is actually basically what is driving most of my business. And so if I can do it one person, a lot of companies could do so much more just by embracing, for example, LinkedIn and maybe a bit of Twitter and Instagram and so on.
Absolutely. I see that we're 45 minutes has gone past, which is crazy. That time flies when you're having fun. I don't know if it's just when we're speaking about interesting topics. So if anybody has any questions you wanted to talk about, any interesting themes, any challenges that you guys might have, feel free to like shoot them out in the chat or in the Q&A feature and we can talk about them. But I also want to follow up on what we were speaking about previously. And Eric, you guys have started some initiatives to like engage the people and start like proactively creating these scenarios that would otherwise just be natural, like the coffee machine box. I can talk a bit more about how you did that and some of the tips for people in that scenario.
Sure. I mean, we've done several different things, and it's it's about just like Astrid says, to have both presence online but also offline. And right now, we've been used to being at home for some time, and now we're going back to work. So now I need to almost learn to walk again, but in the new way, the new hybrid format. And we've been doing this for in many different ways. We have digital water cooler moments. We have optional morning coffee chats. Where everyone's invited really just come in and have a chat no matter where you are. But the one thing that I would really like to recommend people, which I found has really been a success at Catalyst One at least, is that we initiated what we call friends groups. And that's my friends group was then a group of colleagues which lives quite close to each other. Since they live quite close to each other, then you could plan a friends group meeting offline so that you actually get to go out and meet people offline in an environment which is not related to work. It could, for example, be that you took a walk around the lake and then had a fika, at one of the cafes around the lake. But because then you have different perspectives of things. You need to meet your coworkers both professionally, but then you also have friends. Everything is mixed together, both online and offline. And I think that was a really good offline moment. Online moments, digital water cooler, having company podcasts, etc. These things work. But I would also, for myself, I think I got a really good tip from a leader a couple of years ago, and he said, remember to set off time to not do anything or just to meet people. I think it's really common for CEOs to do. I think they set off time just to be with people at the company, but we should do that as well, because I think it's needed right now.
I was just thinking about an idea. I don't know if you remember there was something called chat roulette at a point. It was very weird, but you go on and they could kind of like chat to some random people. It turned out most of them were naked, so everybody stopped using it again. But I was just thinking, if you're in a big company, you could have the CEO doing this kind of like chat roulette. So every day or maybe every Friday, he will like kind of, chat to some random person online, not random, but someone from the company. So it's just to say, you could also address it a bit playful, instead of making it very formal. And
a great feature for that. Like it pretty much randomizes 3 people from the company and just puts them in a room for them to talk again. So that kind of like in natural interaction with which people, like you might not talk to them on a daily basis because your work don't overlap. But when you can talk, and then you can become friends and build a relationship and build a culture and continue the work, which is really interesting. But since we have only like 10 minutes left, I wanted to make sure that everybody listening in gets like the final tips, and then try to like narrow it down to like, what should we focus on? Like the hybrid workplace, there's no clear solution. Like this isn't exactly the fixed book. You just read this Bible and all of a sudden all of your problems will be fixed, because every workplace is different, every employee is different, every single country is different, companies, and everything is different. So there's no clear fixed solution. But there are of course overarching stuff that you can focus on. So like, how do you engage the like leaders to take more responsibility, and what can you as HR do to make sure that you engage and be supportive to the rest of the organization to get people to build the culture in this hybrid workplace? But also, Astrid, you spoke about the KPIs and actually measure what's important. So I think like if we just group those 3 together, because those are pretty much the essentials. Like you need to track, see what's going on. You need to make sure that you have your leaders engaged, and you need to know, as an HR person, how can you support the rest of the organization? Or as a CEO, how can you support the rest of the organization? And if we have that as an ending point, I'm going to hand it over to Astrid, because I know that you have a lot of data.
Yeah, I'm not sure it quite answers your question, but what I want to say, and I hope that's okay, I kind of like interpret it freely. I think a good place to start is with all the assumptions you have in the organization. So what do we take for granted, or what do we say being true? So it is, for example, just an example. So, it's better if people come in the office, or in order to have a sense of belonging, we need to see each other, or what it could be, and then trying to like dive into those assumptions, also maybe address the problems. So for example, it's a problem if we are never at the workplace at the same time, and kind of like dive into it. So what exactly is the problem? Is it a problem for everyone, or is it just a problem for the CEO or for you? I mean, who is it a problem for, and why? So for example, when people work remote, you're not able to kind of like look when they're starting in the morning in the same way, and you can't like monitor them physically. I also hear from some CEOs who say, if people are not in the office, I can't see how they're doing. And I think for me at least, it's kind of like a fake assumption. I've been in many physical workplaces where the CEO didn't, or my leader didn't have any idea how I was doing anyway. And I could put up a smile and be unhappy, or I could, look unhappy, just like having a, resting bitch face or whatever, right? So, I mean, the assumption that just because we can see each other, we can also see how people are doing. Could we find another way? Could we measure that or track that in another way that will be more fair and maybe also more reliable? And then start experimenting, saying, okay, we have this idea that we might want to fix it in this way, or we might try and see, okay, we set people free for a month, they can come and go as they will. What kind of good things come out of it? What kind of bad things come out of it? Could we then make some other experiments, instead of like saying, okay, right now we've been with the pandemic for a year and a half, we choose this solution, and then we're going to stick with that solution for the next 10 years. I mean, it doesn't have to be that. And I think that kind of culture where we kind of like, you know, are able to change things, and things might not be as solid and put down in 5 bullets, and that's the truth. I think I would like to see that in the organizations, and I also think especially like a younger employees would expect that things are up for discussion, and that you can also tailor it to each individual.
Absolutely, absolutely. Eric, any input?
Well, I think I think systems in general, if we talk structure, hasn't been more important ever in the history of the world. I mean, to have a common foundation which people can work on, which is available, you know, on demand, no matter if you work at the office or if you're at home, you know, things that can help you perform your work. I think that is crucial to have as a underlying foundation of things. Once you have that, then you can start talking about, you know, making things, measuring things more agile and be very flexible. We can certainly see that, you know, things change in terms of performance dialogues. For example, in the past you used to have one each year, which was very big. Nowadays you have quite, you know, shorter ones more often, and by having that, you increase the measurement of things, and I think it helps keeping track of things. So I think that is, having that structure is very, very important, and it will always be important. But once you have that, then you can start thinking about what's important for you. I mean, what's the right solution for you? And once you know what's important to you, then you can start thinking of how you can embrace that. And I think there are things that you always can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like, in order to summarize, like, there's been so much great information and so many, we've also been going back and forth. And like I said, there's no clear solution, but what we probably all can agree on, having the structure and the tools available is going to be beneficial. Number one, does that allow you to give everybody the same opportunity to work with the same tools and the same opportunities to give it, like, make it fully, I lost the word, but I think you understand. Like, make it equal for everyone. And also, tools allows you to start tracking these KPIs and allow you to start using that kind of stuff to actually see what's important, start taking proactive decisions, and work more as a data-driven organization, which I think is an opportunity that we see in the future. But as a CEO or an HR manager, it allows you to free up more time, so you can be more proactive and start looking at engagements and be more proactive with your leaders and be more engaged with the team, and just like be creative, try new things, like look at what others are doing and try to adapt that. And like Astrid said in the beginning, don't make it a 7-month project. Like, try it. If it works, it works. If you like it, like it. It doesn't have to be something you like, let's decide on this and let's stick with that for 10 years. Like, in this world we're living in right now, it's so agile. If you just look back 10 years, like, we didn't even have these, which pretty much now rule our lives. And we don't expect it to be the same in 10 years. We need to be agile. We always need to be constantly evolving. And as HR or CEO or the person responsible, is your job to make sure that you have the foundation, you're there to support the team, and also you make sure that everybody has the right opportunity to succeed, and which I think is really exciting. But before we wrap it up, Eric and Astrid, do you want to say any final words, any final tips, or anything you want to leave people with before we end today?
I just hope that the people who've been watching and will be watching this from HR and maybe other departments, they find it inspiring and not think, oh my God, there's so much to do when I'm already really busy. So it's also a way of looking at how do we work, what is the most important things to us for us to work with. There might be some things that were important earlier, maybe 5-10 years ago, that you should stop doing, because you need to stop doing something in order to get more time to embrace these new things. So finding the time to be creative and to learn about new tools, new skills, I think that's very important. And having a bit fewer emails, a bit fewer meetings or shorter meetings, that's an easy way to start. But also having this kind of conversation about how do we actually adapt in the HR department to this new way of working. And I think one of the things you could do as a small exercise, saying, okay, if we were to start today, if we're a new company, a new startup, how would we recruit, how would we communicate, how would we pre-board and onboard, how we would do all these kind of things, and then see, okay, what are we doing today? What should we stop doing? And what could we embrace and do in different kind of ways? And maybe you will need external consultants in that process, not saying that it has to be me or any of you, but just saying maybe you will need some help from the outside to see it with some clear eyes. Otherwise, you might end up in some of the same discussions you have had for the last 5-10 years. That's what I experienced, at least as a consultant, that it's helpful that somebody from the outside can see it a bit more clearly.
Yeah. Eric, final words?
Final words will be that the change in terms of working hybridly has almost been forced to us. I think there's no turning back, and we know that. And since it is that way, that means that you also need to be aware, just like Astrid says, that, making changes, you need to be very, very, very clear on why you make improvements, for example, and it needs to be very clear to your organization, especially if you're an HR department and you're rolling out things, for example, for managers to do more self-service tasks. It needs to be very clear for them what they're going to do. If they don't know what they're going to do, then they will not do it, or they will do it the wrong way. And try to embrace change, but don't put change on top of change, etc., 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 unless you're prepared, to handle the change management.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guess that's a good thing to remember.
I'm not sure if I can top that, so I might just be like, I'm quiet instead, but I think there's been so many good inputs. If you guys want to get in contact with Eric, myself, or Astrid afterwards, feel free to contact us on LinkedIn, but we will also send out the recording to everybody who missed this. If you have a colleague that thinks they should listen to this conversation, and all of our contact info will also be in that email if you want to get in touch with us. But I want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who listened in, and wish you all a fantastic end of the week. And when the weekend comes, enjoy it. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thank you.